the basket.
Right there. Oh, boy.
It's no good, and that'll do it. That'll do it. The final score here from Southern New Hampshire University. Londonderry High School 57, the Bedford Bulldogs 56. Londonderry Lancers are the 2014 NHIAA girls basketball champions. Coach Fagula in his last game coaching Londonderry High School with the victory.
Welcome to a very special edition with CastleHill Media and Home Run Pizza Productions. I want to introduce, for people who don't recognize this gentleman to my right, is Coach John Fagula, 66, girls basketball coach, Londonderry High School, New Hampshire State Champions 2013-2014.
Sounds good.
How's that sound, Coach?
Sounds great. Been a while.
Just came off an impressive win. You beat an undefeated team, a Bedford High School, led by Sue Thomas and four very good seniors. And you guys, heck of a ball game at SNU. Great victory. And talk about going out on top. You had announced before you were leaving, and that was your final game. What were your emotions when you finished that one up?
I'll tell you, it took a while before it actually hit me a little bit. I mean, knowing going in that was, all through the playoffs, you don't know, okay, could this be the last practice and you could get beat in the quarters or the whatever. But when you get to the finals, then you know, okay, one more practice, one more game, got no second chances to take it over and try again. So
yeah,
it was something that is very difficult for me to try to explain, but I'm sure over the years it will be greatly appreciated, and I will obviously, remember it quite fondly.
Well, if you were a basketball fan and you were there, or if you're going to be able to watch it on video through CastleHill Media Productions, it was a heck of a ball game.
I was actually quite surprised as the game got ready to get started. I started turning around to get in the introductions and started looking up in the stands, and it was like, wow, this is pretty full. I was surprised that just the two high school girls teams would be filling that up. But there was a lot of hype about it.
Yep.
And I think those were the teams that everybody originally thought were going to be there at the end. But you know how often that ever happens. Usually one or both sometimes don't get there.
Yeah.
But
yeah, one versus two, and that's what we wanted in a state championship game for sure. We have a real treat with the show today because later on we're going to actually run the fourth quarter, and we're going to go sort of do a play-by-play and analysis of that. But right now I want to just do a little background on where you came from. But talk about an impressive resume. Is it 32 years coaching?
Girls basketball.
Girls basketball. 624 wins. 12 state titles, 11 with Nashua, 1 with Londonderry. Am I sitting with the John Wooden of girls basketball here in New Hampshire?
No, he writes a lot better books than I do. But, it's been a great number of years that, and I think the one thing that's pleased me is over the years, the number of times that we've been, if we haven't been in the finals, we've been in the semis quite a few times, and so the consistency of year to year, you can have runs where you have a great group of kids for 4 or 5 years, or 2 or 3 years, but for 32 years of being about 85%, that's the thing that makes me feel pretty good, is the consistency. And I think that these kids were a good group of kids to kind of finish with.
Yeah, great group.
And
of
we're not
kids.
leaving the cupboard bare. There's a lot of good underclassmen.
Oh, we're going to talk about that group because as I look at it, you've got really one senior starter leaving and the rest are underclassmen. They're staying. So look forward to a very legacy type team you're leaving behind for Londonderry, and they should be thrilled to have that group for the next 4 or 5 years or more. We're sitting here, it's March 21st, 2014, 32 years. Where's it gone? Where's the time gone?
Well, I'll tell you, prior to the game and pretty much every Christmas, I keep getting Christmas cards with pictures of some of my former players and their families. And prior to the game, I had an opportunity to talk to some people that I hadn't seen in a while that made the effort to show up knowing, not just because it was the championship game, but I think knowing that it was going to be the last game that I was going to work. So I was extremely pleased to see so many people that I haven't seen for a while. But when you start looking at some of their kids and how old they are and everything else, it gets a little scary, to be honest with you.
Creeps up on you, for sure. So a little background. You told me earlier you were born in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, but you grew up in the Laconia area.
Right.
What was it like growing up in the Laconia area back then?
It was, it was a great place because at that time Laconia was a larger high school than it is now. It included Guilford and a couple of other smaller surrounding areas that are now kind of branched off into other places. We were one of the maybe smaller schools in Class L, but we competed in Class L in all three major sports. I played football, baseball, and basketball, but basketball was kind of like something to do in the winter. Football and baseball were baseball was probably my primary sport. But living in the Lakes region, you really can't beat it. I mean, it's not that far away from what people would say, the big cities, but it's also, it was a clean area, go swimming anytime you want during the summer and skiing or whatever. I didn't ski that much after I got into high school, but it was just a real nice place to be from.
You're right there in the lakes, you got the mountains, it's fresh air, it's New Hampshire fresh air, you can't beat that for sure. You said that you played some sports and you went on to college in Nebraska and to play a little baseball. Tell us about that experience.
Well, it was an opportunity to play some pretty good baseball, and I actually had an opportunity after I was done to possibly sign with a minor league contract for the Detroit Tigers. But it was one of those things where, as a non-pitcher or catcher, you knew you're going to spend years trying to work your way up through the program. And at that time, I was planning on getting married, and I had an opportunity to. In those days, it was difficult to get a teaching job, and I had an opportunity with my former high school football coach, Ken Parity, who then moved to Nashua, had a position available for me, helped me get into as a teacher, which was tough at the time. And it was just, you weigh it out and you say, okay, let's be realistic. What are the chances? Had I not had, the getting married and so forth, I think I probably would have taken a shot for a couple years with the minor league thing. But in reality, it's like, where you're going. That's,
Yeah.
It was fun, but.
A lot of bus rides and a lot of hope down the
Well,
road
at
that may
that
not
time,
happen.
too, there were no signing bonuses or anything like that. So.
Yeah, and more like a bragging right, but
Yeah.
but just to be considered, that's an honor for sure.
I was, yeah.
Probably something most people don't know about Coach Fagula.
Right. Well, and I was an all-state football player as well, but
And who was
it's funny how basketball had become the thing that took up. I mean, I did coach football and baseball at Nashua for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And then in '78, I was given the opportunity to take over the girls' basketball job because, to be honest with you, nobody else wanted it. It was 1 in 19 for 3 years running prior to that.
Wow.
And so when I had been doing the middle school for a while, a couple of years, and it just felt like, I'll give it a shot.
Thing to do. We're going to get into that Nashua and then Londonderry legacy in a moment. Going back to high school, you were Division I Laconia. Who were the big rivalries back then? Were you playing the Manchester teams?
Yeah.
Were you playing the Centrals?
We played all the big boys. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We scrimmaged Nashua. We didn't play them, but everybody else at that time, Portsmouth was the big school because of
The
you know,
base.
the base.
Yeah,
absolutely.
people forget about that. That was a huge school.
Oh, yeah, and they were always pretty good. But we played, you know, Memorial, and when Memorial used to be really good,
Yeah.
they had a lot of really a lot of good players that went on and played some pretty good football.
Well,
so.
Memorial, it's funny because, like, I think they started their season, I want to say early 60s. Prior to that, everybody went to Central.
Right.
When Memorial split, it was a huge rivalry right off the bat for football. And that very next year, if I get my my facts right, I think Wally Rosmith was the quarterback, led Memorial on an upset victory over Central the first year they split. So the rivalries of Manchester just goes back decades.
We used to scrimmage Billy Hall, who was coaching Central at the time. And,
Okay.
and Buzz Harvey when he was at Nashua, and then we played everybody else. So we played all the big guns. And,
Yeah.
and in fact, my senior year we won, you know, we won the state championship. So
In football?
yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And what year was that, your senior year?
65.
65. We talked a little earlier before the show.
That's 19, not 18.
1965, got it.
Not the Civil War.
Yeah, that would have put you back there with Lee and the boys. And anyways, talked a little earlier about growing up, and we talked about the multiple sports. In the springtime, you played baseball. In the fall time, you played football. In the winter time, you played either basketball or hockey. And you said you participated in all those sports. Very, very the norm back then.
Absolutely.
Today, the kids are making decisions in like 4th, 5th, or 6th grade to go into one sport. In your mind, what's the pros and cons behind that program?
I don't like it at all. I think that, you know, there is a time when you can maybe by your junior year feel like you have more opportunities in one sport than another, and you could focus on that a little bit. But to just, you know, as a middle school kid or even earlier than that in some cases, to focus on one thing, I think it really takes away from being able, you know, it's like going to a liberal arts college. You want to experience a number of different things because you might find out that certain other things you really like that you didn't think that you would. But also, I think it's a real problem with burnout, I think, with a lot of kids. They get, you know, on these travel teams, you know, from like 4th, 5th grade on. After a while, you know, you get to be a high school kid and you're just, you know, I'm tired. You know, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's when you should be getting excited about getting out and really getting involved with some of these sports a little bit more. You know, it's good to go out and find out how you fit in comparison to others.
Sure.
From an athletic standpoint, but so many kids, they change a great deal physically over the, you know, those years. And some kids, you know, grow early and stop growing, and some, you know, find that they're a little gawky early on and then get a lot more athletic later. So to focus on one thing, I think is really a mistake now. You know, maybe in other things, like if you were in music or something like that, maybe that, you know, that might work there, but it just, to me,
a true lifetime sport, like you said, with music, for sure. Yeah. Well, one of the things I always warn parents who want to hear my opinion, but is I call it the funnel effect, because as you're in grade school, there's this many kids and you're all playing, and then as you get to junior high, they're taking less and less, and when you get to high school, there's only a few trickle out. So if you've committed yourself into that program and you're not one of the people who get selected, now you haven't played anything but that sport, and now you're behind the 8 ball and doing other sports. So I'm a proponent of what you're saying. Try multiple sports.
You know, I had one of the young ladies that I had a little while ago now, Stephanie Murphy, who came out of Londonderry and went to Boston College. She ended up being her freshman year, was Rookie of the Year in the ACC, which is pretty impressive.
Sure.
She played all 3 sports, and it didn't bother her. You know, I mean, and softball was just something to kind of do. And she still was able to do her AAU stuff and things like that. But I think it made her a more well-rounded type kid. And athletically, you begin to use more muscles, do different things instead of just, you know, basically doing the same thing all the time.
Well, it sounds like Stephanie's an exception to the rule because a lot of these coaches are saying, especially the soccer guys who are saying, once you commit, you're year-round. We don't want you to do anything else. And I think they're doing a disservice to
Well,
the
we lost
kid.
a young lady, Maeve Holland, who was on our varsity team as a freshman, and very good soccer player, and decided that she wanted to focus on that. And she ended up getting a scholarship to go to this year. She was a senior this year, and she's going to Richmond. And so you can't, you know, argue that, you know, as to what she did. But I still think that she could have done both, you know. But they put a lot of pressure on them to do different things during the season, and then we have rules about, you know, you can't miss practices or games to go do something else for another sport.
Sure, makes sense.
And so she decided the commitment was more there, and, you know, I mean, we went along with it. But there's a kid that was you know, a great athlete, that maybe not a great basketball player, but a great athlete, and certainly wouldn't have hurt us.
Right. You'd love to have a kid like that.
Yeah, I mean, she's about
your
5'10" or 11, and she's got tremendous athleticism.
Yeah.
You know, tough.
I think some of the parents are at fault here because they think their kids are better than they are, and they're all, you know, D1 scholarship material, when in fact very few people make D1.
Right.
And so address that, you know, kids who go on to D1 versus 2 or 3 or even less.
Well, I think nowadays you go to a lot of the AAU tournaments, and because you're on a roster, you get literature from some of the coaches. And so immediately parents start thinking, my kid's getting recruited by so-and-so.
Right.
And they're really not. You know, it's just form letters that are sent out. And consequently, they start thinking that, you know, my kid should be, how come she's not starting? She's getting letters from such and such a school and so forth. And it makes it a little bit difficult. And a lot of times, you don't realize how that, you got to be a pretty good player to play any level at the college level. And for you to be in that Division I thing, yeah, there's even quite a difference within Division I, but it's not something that comes by. And I think when I was at Nashville, we were putting out a lot of kids every year into colleges, and I think people felt that it was the norm, and that if you made the varsity, automatically you were going to get a scholarship somewhere. And you know, that gets to be a little bit demanding, and people, the realization wasn't really there. And I think Ed Beatty at Winnacunnet found the same thing, you know, when they had their winning streak for 4 or 5 years, that winning wasn't even good enough. You know, it's like you're not beating teams enough, or you're not getting enough kids into D1 schools or whatever. And it's like you can't win for winning, you know. And then if you lose 1 or 2 games, it's like, what happened, you know?
Yeah.
It gets crazy. And it's difficult to explain to people until you've been in that situation and understand. You build things up to a certain point, and you get to a great level, and then people, the expectations are ridiculous.
Plus, when you go to D1, it's all about size and speed.
Yeah.
I mean, these kids are such tremendous athletes up and down that lineup, including the 5 or 7 kids who are sitting on the bench. They're all fast, tall, athletic, and it's tough to break in.
I was on a national committee for girls AAU basketball for about 10 years. And so we were at all the major tournaments. We ran the tournaments. And every tournament, college coaches would come in and they would buy the different rosters of everybody. And the first thing their assistant coaches would do would go down and highlight 6'1", 6'2", 6'4", 6'5". Whether the kid was a good player or not, didn't matter.
Boy, yeah.
You know,
Sure.
and the difference usually from D1 to D2 is D1s get the great big kids and the great point guards, and the real super shooting guards. D2 gets the project big kid or an undersized kid that can probably play in the post at D2. And they get they get good guards, but you know they come. I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but
You can absolutely
out of
say
the high
that.
school
Yeah,
later,
absolutely.
you know, that's there are a lot of kids that can handle the ball a little bit and shoot a little bit, but it is when you see the elite, you really notice the difference between, oh, that's big time basketball, or that's in track or something like that. It's like, wow, now I see what you're talking about when you talk about speed.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom until you see it.
I've always said, in your sport in particular, that if you can hit 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 from the free throw line consistently, and you're a very good three-point shooter, you can punch your ticket almost anywhere.
Well, they can find spaces for you because you're right. You watched a few of the games last night that were on TV, and one game in particular, the foul shooting was horrendous, and that's the only reason that one team got back, and it's the only reason that the game stayed close was because the teams did not make a fairly decent percentage of their free throws, and those are the things that you would expect, that if you work at your game and there's nobody playing defense on you, you ought to be able to make 70% or better most of the time.
Yeah, that's what hurt Bedford in your game.
Yeah.
When we look back at the
well, to be honest with you, the year before they were lucky. I don't say lucky to win, but they were lucky because of the number of foul shots that they missed in that game, and still were able to win.
They're still able to win, sure. Yeah, you talk about
because usually you miss a fair amount of free throws in a game that's going to be probably pretty close.
It's going to cost you.
It usually does burn you.
Yeah, and we talked about that during the game, how free throws win or lose championships, and it's so true how that comes into play. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you got into coaching. You touched upon a little bit. You were forego your baseball career. You went on. You were a teacher. Somebody invited you over to Nashua. Is that the first time you started coaching? Was in the Nashua system?
Yes.
And
well, actually, I coached in Laconia. When I was 18, I was coaching a Babe Ruth League baseball team.
Oh, okay.
And as it turned out, my team ended up winning the league, so I got to coach the All-Star team. And who do we match up with? We get to the finals in the state for Babe Ruth. Who do we match up against? Mike Flanagan out of Memorial, who ends up going on and being a Cy Young winner with the Baltimore Orioles, and worked in their system a lot. So. And
you faced actually Flanagan in the game, and how did it come out?
Well, I didn't face him, but as a coach.
As a coach, you faced him.
Yeah. Well, it was 0-0. We had to go 9 innings instead of 7, and every time we got somebody in scoring position with, less than 2, he found a way to either strike somebody out or get an out without giving up a run. Yeah. And we ended up losing the game 9 innings, 1-0.
1-0. Yeah.
But he was, and when he was playing at Memorial, he went to UMass and played basketball as well. I saw him score 40 at Nashua. He was the Iceman. I mean, he was unbelievable. Nothing ever seemed to bother him. He was the coolest guy going. And when it got tough, you wouldn't know that he had a nerve in his body.
Well, you bring up a good point. I was a freshman when Flanagan graduated. I think he graduated in 70 or 71. Mm-hmm. But he was such an outstanding basketball player. He got the baseball scholarship. But I contend today that if they had a 3-point line back then, some of his scoring records would still be holding today because he was shooting smooth from the outside. And I believe
I saw him get 40 in Nashua.
Yeah. He
needed 40.
And he did that night after night.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember one year, I think they played Central for the championship. It came down to Flanagan hitting 2 free throws at the end to ice the game and win it up in Durham. And phenomenal athlete in basketball, and as you know, a tremendous baseball player. So Mike Flanagan, of the Baltimore Orioles, great athlete. So you started coaching. You were also a teacher. Was this also a way to make a few bucks? Because I know they gave you some money to do that.
At that time, that's pretty much what it was. I think my first salary was probably about $6,600
Okay.
for the whole year.
Yeah.
And coaching football was $400.
Nice.
Yeah, from the middle of August till Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's like vacation money. Today you can't get a dinner in Manhattan for that.
I
But
know. It's crazy. But, you know, I had the person that I played high school football for, like I say, Ken Parody was the head coach in Nashua then, and he kind of brought me in and helped me get the position. I actually made the position because it wasn't available in the history department. Buzz Harvey, who was the athletic director, basically told the history department, "You're going to find him a job. You're going to make a position for him."
so you were a history major, teacher.
Yes.
Yeah. What was your favorite subject in history?
I liked ancient medieval history.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I had about 4 preps in while I was working, but that was kind of my favorite one.
Okay. Coincidental, history is my favorite subject too, so we can talk a little
Well, we
history.
talk about coaching too. You know, as a coach, one of the things that you should do is learn a little bit about like history of some of the generals and how they prepared themselves for battle, and learn how to play chess, because it's a game where you're constantly planning ahead, 2 or 3, 4, 5 moves ahead, and it really, it does get your mind thinking that way. And if you're gonna be successful in coaching, you can't make decisions on what's happening now. You got to kind of have a pretty good idea of what you're looking at ahead of time, and then when it comes in and it fits in what you're already planning, then it makes it a little bit easier to implement.
Great advice. Great advice. I'm going to pick up chess now so I can get my basketball coaching career off the ground. Did you have a mentor growing up? Was there a coaching mentor?
Yeah, Ken Parody, as my football coach. He was one of these people who he was such a classy guy. He always put the players first. He always would find ways to motivate. And, he was never, you hear stories about some of the coaches, especially football coaches, that can get a little bit crazy. I mean, he made you work, but, he was consistent in the way he handled everybody. And
Sure.
It was very fair. And, when you did your job, you got praised, and when you didn't, you were told why you weren't, getting it done. And to me, that's all you can do, is be consistent with the kids that you have.
Great advice. Great advice. Let's start now with Nashua. Nashua North. That's when they had one high school. The Purple Panthers, I believe, is the.
It's actually south, but
it's south now.
Right.
But it was one
just
high
Nashua.
school at that point.
It was just
and now
Nashua.
it's north and south.
right.
You said you started there about 70, 71. Did they have a girls' basketball program prior to you getting there? And how were they?
Well, actually, I taught at Elm Street
Okay.
but I had 9th graders. The 9th grade was at Elm Street. They just had 3 grades at the high school, and they had basketball. But like I say, for a number of years prior to me getting involved, they hadn't won a lot of games, and the program was kind of weak. And so when a job came open, there weren't a lot of people knocking the doors down to get it. And but I had been fortunate enough that I had been doing some coaching at the 9th grade, junior high level, and I knew that there was some talent coming through. In fact, there was one young lady who I thought was as good as anybody around. And at that time, you really didn't know a whole lot about camps and things like that. So her freshman year, I brought her down in New Jersey to an all-star camp. And
her name is?
Sally Madeira.
Okay.
And she you know, it was one of those things where I asked the guy, I'm here, and I worked the camp, so I was there for the whole week. And I said, you know, I just want to find out where this kid fits in, you know, and how is she in comparison to kids outside of our area. And by the end of the week, she got MVP of the camp.
Nice.
So I said, I guess she's pretty good. And it's not just me thinking that, she's a good player. And she was about 6'1", and very athletic, very strong. By her senior year, we won our first state championship with her.
And that, what year was that?
82.
82, okay.
And then she went on to play at Boston College. Had 4 great years
Oh,
at
that's
Boston
impressive.
College.
Yeah. And what is she today, do you know?
She is living down in Connecticut.
Okay.
In fact, even quite a few years after, she was playing, still playing a lot of basketball, and she would come up every once in a while with a travel team that would scrimmage some of the
nice.
local colleges,
Yeah.
and so forth. So, and then she started running decathlons and doing, you know, all kinds of things like that.
True athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of her kids will end up at with the Huskies and Yukon program down there. Who knows?
Could be. I did have someone that went there. Kerry Bascom was Gino's first, you know, All-American, and got him to his first Final Four.
Really?
Yeah, she was the one that had the scoring lead for a long time, and then they had that one issue where the one kid had broken her foot, and they put her back in the game to score a couple of baskets.
Oh, to break her record.
And it was her record that they broke. Yeah.
Wow. Now that's pretty impressive too.
Yeah. So I knew Gino before he was Gino.
Before he was the
Yeah, he was an
star.
actually he was the assistant coach at Virginia for the.
Oh, was he?
Prior to that.
Good guy.
Yeah, but he's one of these guys that, you know, you knew he was going to be successful because he just is so intense.
Yeah.
So intense, and you know, once he started getting good kids in, it was, you know, you read about some of the kids having a hard time, you know, dealing with him, but you know, he's one of these guys that if you do what you're being asked to do, and you can put up with a little crap now and then, you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
But you're gonna work for it.
Yeah.
You know, there's no easy way around it. And at that level, and at that, they kind of own you a little bit, you know, and not everybody can do that.
Yeah, tough job. You're always in the spotlight, and you know, one losing season and a semi-losing season, all of a sudden they're calling for your head. So it is a tough job. But talk about you. I thought Sue Thomas had a great year this year, 20-0. She had a 39-game winning streak, which I thought was phenomenal until you told me prior to our show, a 120-game winning streak.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's still the state record. I'm sure no one's even come close to that. Who's come close? Is Sue's record the closest?
No, Winnicott.
Winnicott.
I think they had about 75.
75 at Winnicott.
Yeah.
Okay. How tough was that to continue that? Game in, game out, week in, week out, year in, year out.
Yeah, it does get to be tough. It wears on you a little bit mentally. You know, you're always answering questions to the media about things that, you know, sometimes you've got answers and other times you don't. But it was difficult. You know, you're getting the other team's best effort all the time. That they want nothing more than to be the one that knocked it off. And to get the kids to focus on being ready every time you show up. Because you know, like I say, the other team can't wait to jump on you. And so I think that's probably the hardest thing. When you're talking about high school kids, you know how inconsistent they are with anything in their life. So for them to be that consistent over basically a 5-year period, and it's not just 1 or 2 kids who, you know, you could depend on that were just that much better than everybody else, and that's why that record. But 5 years is a lot longer, and it had its pluses, but it also had a lot of negatives, you know. And then and because the team was that good, your second team was better than most teams' first team.
Sure.
So even when you let up on teams, the scores still got a little bit out of control. And that's the only thing that people would look at. They wouldn't look at box score and say, oh, look, you know, nobody got more than 15 points.
Right.
He's got 10 kids. They all scored in double figures or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, a couple times media would call and say, you know, how could you do that? I said, well, did you see the game? You know, no. Well,
right.
You know, we weren't pressing. We weren't, I mean, these kids can play and they can shoot, and the other team isn't that good. And, you know, like I say, the second team would probably beat, we could have finished probably first and second for a couple of those years if we split our team up.
Split your team up. That's an interesting point.
And you know, and you talk about Division I kids. And there were 10 kids on that team. 8 of them went Division I. Now, they weren't all there at the same time. You know, they were sophomores, freshmen, you know, that kind of thing. But when they graduated, 8 of them, 8 of that group went Division I. One was a Division II All-American, and one of the other kids opted to go do another sport.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Well, it's funny because you had that luxury when the subs come off the bench, they're trying to impress the coach, so they're going to play harder than the starters in some
well,
cases.
There were a few situations where we had a couple games in a row in that year where early in the year he scored over 100 points. And by the second time, we had gotten so much grief about it that it was, you know, I started, there was another time coming up right after that was similar was happening. We got to about 90-something, and I literally told my point guard, the backup kid, and like you said, the second kids are out there, they want to play. You know,
they don't impress the coach. Yeah.
And I had to tell them, hold the ball. Don't try and do anything. So they'd get embarrassed by getting a hell ball call on them or whatever, or they'd go to the foul line and I'd say, miss the shots. So they'd brick the shots. And after one of the games where that happened, I finally said, you know what, this is stupid. Does it really make a difference whether it's 90-something or 100 and something? Is there that much of a difference between that extra number? I said, you know, I'm not going to embarrass you anymore. Whatever happens, happens. We're not going to go for it, but if it happens because the other team is that weak and maybe quits or whatever, I mean, we stop trying to run our breaks. We don't press and we sub. And people will not believe this. Now, this was prior to they did have the three-point. That was the first year in '87 that the three-point shot came in.
Yep.
We shot one three-point shot all year long. One on an inbounds play.
Really?
I swear to God.
Wow.
Not one kid scored 20 points the whole season. Not one. Now, these kids are going to Stanford, they're going to Duke, they're going, you know, BC. They didn't get 20 points. So it wasn't like I was keeping a kid in to get 40 or 50,
right.
You know, things like that. But people that wouldn't see the game would go, come on, girls basketball, how the heck can you score that many points without really trying to, you know, make somebody look bad? But they were that good.
They were that good. Well, you touched upon the '87 team. USA Today named the National High School girls basketball team the best team in the nation. I mean, kudos. Wow. In the nation.
Right. And I'm sure that a lot of people say, how could you justify that with the fact that, you know, they don't play some of the quality teams that other teams from California or New York or whatever. But we would travel for tournaments, and that's where we would get the rep from. And also the fact that who they were being recruited by, and that you had so many on the same team that were going to be Division I, big-time Division I scholarship kids.
So when you went to those tournaments and you played those schools, Massachusetts...
We played Lisa Leslie out of California. You know, she became a big-time pro. She was on a team from California that we played down in Tennessee, and there was another big kid with her. And we played their team, and were fortunate enough to win. But Kara Walters we played her in a Christmas tournament, and another year now. Kara was a different kid. She was a little bigger, a little huskier, but 6'8". You know, she scored 40, but we scored 25 more points than they did as a group.
Yeah.
So you know.
Well, it is a team. There's 5 on that floor. That if you have 5
Well,
good players,
fortunately
you
they
can
didn't
beat
have
one.
any. Fortunately, they didn't have any good guards, and that made all the difference. But I mean, we competed against teams from Oregon that were ranked in these things. We would go. One of the tournaments we went to was down in New York City. Christ the King High School would compete against them in preseason stuff or in their tournament. So it wasn't like we were just good for New Hampshire. We were a good team.
Right. And that was my question coming in here. Was it just New Hampshire? But you've answered that. You
Yeah.
went all
and
over
the
and
AAU
played.
stuff that, actually the group that I had when they were 14, I had 8 of them on my 14-year-old AAU team that went to a national tournament. Now, it wasn't that many years after that they finally started saying, you know what, you can only have like 33% of your own kids on your own team. So it's basically like 3 out of 12 or something like that.
Really? So
25%.
was that a John Fagula rule, you think?
It was in this area. It was here, yeah.
Wow. Well, there you go. The legacy continues. I love those stories. That's a great story because one of my questions was, did you have the calls to break the team up? And in fact, they did. The AAU team, they wanted to break them up.
Well, also early on during this particular time, we didn't have the state dictating the schedule for us. So, and we didn't play everybody. We would play the better teams twice, and some of the other teams once, some not at all. And then more teams started to drop us, and it was hard for us to get games. We had to go out of state to get games. And then eventually the state said, okay, we're gonna make your schedule for you. You're gonna play everybody in the division.
Yeah.
Which was good for us.
Which was good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if somebody said, well, okay, here comes Nashville, we don't want to touch them, scratch them off the schedule and not be embarrassed.
Right.
But you actually took a girls program because when did girls basketball really come into play in New Hampshire? Like, let me go back. When I was in high school in the 70s, we did not have girls' sports per se. They had field hockey.
Yeah.
They had, I don't even think they played soccer back then in basketball, and they might have played softball.
They played basketball, but they played 6-on-6.
And there was a ski team, things like that.
Yeah.
So you really came into your prominence and really dictated to the schools how to play this game.
Well, because I got involved with AAU outside of New Hampshire, because there was nothing in New Hampshire with AAU, and I went down to this young lady that I had, Sally Madeira. She played for a gentleman outside in the Boston area, and the AAU team was called. They were just basically New England, and they had a couple kids from one from Maine, one from Vermont, my kid from New Hampshire, and the rest were the top kids out of Massachusetts. And that was it. And I got involved because he called me up one time and said, look, we need a certain number of teams to compete in the state tournament so that we can qualify to go to the New Englands and to the Nationals. So I started bringing down some of my other kids that weren't quite as good, but they were, pretty good kids. And after a couple years, we started winning. And then eventually we started knocking off some of the teams that they expected to win to go to the Nationals. And that's when he said, I think it's time for you to start your own AAU program in New Hampshire. So we did.
Good for you. The Nashua program, you told me earlier, how many years were you at Nashua?
As far as girls basketball, 20.
Okay. why did you leave the program, or when and why did you leave the program? After all that success.
If I'm going to be honest with you, I had an incident where some of my younger players got themselves into a little trouble.
Okay.
And I've always had this thing about, there's a lot of things you can do, but lying to me is not one of them. I need to be able to trust. And so when I heard indications that there had maybe have been an issue late in the season, I didn't really hear about it until after the season was over.
Okay.
Because apparently my senior class wasn't involved, but they heard about it and they said to the younger players, shut up, because you're not going to blow our season by getting thrown off the team because of something stupid. But after the season, somehow or other, information got around to me. Went and talked with our AD. We had sit-downs with some of the kids. And basically they just flat out lied to me about what happened and what went on. And when I eventually found out what happened, I said, you know, if I can't trust you, and these were kids that were like sophomores and stuff at the time, and I said, how am I going to be able to trust you if you point blank lied right to my face and to the principal and to the AD and everybody else? I just don't feel comfortable dealing with this, and so I'm done.
So your principals were higher than your wins and losses?
Yeah.
Great.
And, you know, of course, they broke down and, you know, there was a lot of crying going on and a lot of apologizing and everything else, but it was just, that's the way it's going to be. And so I left, and then I was out for 4 years. And then I actually got a call from my assistant coach, Nick Theos. His dad was coaching at Londonderry at the time.
Okay.
And he said, I'm wondering if you'd be interested in, he said, I'm thinking about not coaching, and I wondered if you'd be interested in getting back in. Because he said, I think I got a couple good young kids coming, and I think you'd be the guy to work with them.
Hold that thought 1 second, because I got 2 follow-up questions on that. The AD at the time you were dealing with in Nashua was?
Al Harrington.
Was Butch Joseph your AD at any point?
He was an assistant.
Assistant AD, okay.
Yeah. He was an assistant principal, and eventually was, you know, he left to go back to, you know, he's a Manchester guy, so
right.
He was back in Manchester as an assistant AD later on. But yeah, he was an assistant principal at the high school for a long time.
Yeah. Educator, coach.
Great guy.
Great guy.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a word you
Referee.
can describe, referee, official, mentor,
Yep.
just Butch Joseph is one of the classics, and a great human being for sure. You talked to me about your assistant coach calling you. How many of your assistant coach went on to be head coaches?
Well, I don't, you know, there's been a number of them that have, between AAU and the high school team, like the young lady that was just at Nashua South, Jen Hogan. I don't remember Mary's name, so I do hers, but Faye. But Michelle Sanuda coached at Alvern for a number of years. But a lot of times some of the female athletes, you know, I mean female coaches, you know, they got pregnant, and after, you know, a pregnancy or two, having a couple of kids, it's kind of hard to spend time away coaching.
Yep.
And right now, there's a couple coaches in the state in Division I that were former AAU coaches of mine, as well as college coaches. Karen Pinkos up at Southern New Hampshire was a former AAU player of mine, and there's quite a few of them. And it was interesting the first time that I had to coach against one of my former players.
I bet it was.
Yeah. You know, there was a classic.
She knew all the moves.
Well, there was a classic line. I'm sitting down talking with her before the game, and the first time that we met, and the guy from the Nashville Telegraph came by, and he sat down, he started talking to us, and he goes, so, he asked Michelle, he says, so did he teach you everything you know about basketball? And I said, I don't know about everything she knows, but I didn't teach her everything I know. And you know, so there are times when you feel like, okay, I got to hold some things back, you know, because later on, you know, it's one of those things where you don't want it to come back and bite you. But you know, I was fortunate that it didn't come back to haunt me too many times.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So you told me you took a few years off in between Nashua, Londonderry calls. Talk to us about how that evolved. And you've been at Londonderry, you said, for a dozen years?
Yeah, now, yeah.
So talk to us about your experience at Londonderry.
Well, to be quite honest with you, when I got the call, a lot of people were saying, do you really want to go back? And if you do, is that the place to go? Because for a while, Londonderry had been one of these places where people talked about how it was difficult with some of the parents, that they were, you know, they were hard on coaches. And there were a couple, you know, when I was coaching against them that I knew were giving some people some problems through AAU stuff. I heard different things. But not a lot, but you know, it certainly was there. But it's there pretty much everywhere. So when I went in to get interviewed by the superintendent, which their building is across the street from the high school, and I walk in, and now this is after having lost to us a number of times in the semifinals or finals.
Any of those blowouts involved in there?
No, not blowouts, because they were always pretty good games, but they always ended up kind of on the short end of it. And so some of the looks that I got from the secretaries that were over there was like, what is he doing here, you know?
It's like Darth Vader walking
Oh,
in.
man. Yeah. And so it took a while for them to kind of get used to the idea that I would be with them and not against them, right, as they say down south.
Yeah, not against them. So is it like riding a bike after being away 4 or 5 years? Did you feel right at home getting back on the court with the girls, and or did it take some adjusting?
Well, it took a little adjusting. I think on their part more than anything else, because what I found was there was talent, but the intensity level and the physicality wasn't there.
Okay.
Not that it couldn't be there, but it wasn't there. And so the first year it was a little tough to get them to understand how I wanted them to practice and what it should be like in game situations, the intensity level, the aggressiveness, and still leave it off the court. After you leave the court, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually we got to the point where they kind of figured that part out, but they weren't as tough physically or mentally as the kids from Nashua had been. And I think that was probably the only real difference. But they responded pretty well after a while.
12 years, you told me at the end of the championship game that this particular group had been in the mix, semis or finals, for the last 4 or 5 years. When did you start seeing success with the Londonderry program?
Actually, pretty much right off.
Okay.
You know, I mean, what I would consider to be success, which means that you're going to be, you know, in the top 4 or 5 teams almost every year in the rankings, and go fairly deep into the tournament every year.
Yeah.
It was right off, pretty much.
Yeah. How has the girls' game evolved since you started?
Well, because of so much travel and the ability for them to go out and play against better competition, they realize that there are a lot of things that they need to work on to get better. I think the one thing probably, the skill levels I think are better, but it's strength. They're in the weight room. They're doing other things that girls never did at all in high school, and now they're doing it at a fairly early age. I remember one kid that I had that was an All-American, went to the University of Rhode Island, and when she got the scholarship during the spring after her senior year, she was given workout stuff from URI, and she had to go into the weight room. She knew nothing about the weight room, and so she asked me if I could go in and help her, you know, just show her how to do some of the things, because we didn't have a lot of training at that time for other than football players. So I went in, and now this kid was strong in the legs and everything else. Couldn't bench press the bar. Now here's a kid that was a high school All-American basketball. Couldn't bench press the bar. So automatically now, to me, that's where a lot of these kids are different. They're just stronger.
Do you have a weight program that the girls are in?
Yeah, they do. I don't push it as much as some programs do. Some of them do a lot of it on their own. But you know, we make it available. It is available to them, and some of them take advantage of it. Some do not in the off season. A lot of it is because in the off season too, they're doing a lot of the traveling and AAU stuff. So unlike some of the other sports, during the winter when we're doing basketball, you know, like softball or lacrosse and stuff, they come in a couple of times a week and they go through a weight program and stuff. For us, it's basically summertime, and that's about it.
Speaking about assistants, Courtney Cheatham, assistant to Sue Thomas over the years here in Bedford, now head coach in Merrimack. What do you say to the Courtney Cheathams of the world who are just starting out on their journey?
Well, I think she's got a good head start because she's been involved in a number of programs. She's not afraid to get out there and see what's out there and try a number of different things. She's involved, showing up in the summer to watch the kids play. Those are the kind of things that you have to show, that if you're going to ask commitment from them, you've got to give them commitment back, and you got to show them that you're willing to put the time in, even if it's just going to watch them play and maybe critiquing some of the things that they're doing in the off season. And she is definitely committed to that kind of stuff, and she's aggressive, and she's willing to put the time in, and that's, to me, that's half the battle.
How do you want to be remembered as a person?
Personally, I guess I want to be remembered as somebody that, couple of things, cared about the kids that he's been involved with more than most people would think. I think sometimes they think that all I thought about was winning, and that wasn't the case. That winning was going to come if you did certain things, if you made the commitments, and if you put the effort in, and that I would do the same thing, whether it was to help, situations in school, out of school, after they were done, to stay involved, helping them any way that you can. So from that standpoint, I guess someone who just cares about all the players, who are willing to give him an honest effort, and to try to be, probably the other thing would be consistency in how you try to handle everybody, whether it's the superstar or the kid that's just barely making the program. Treat them the same way, give them the same advantages, disadvantages, and whatever.
And how do you want to be remembered as a coach? You may have mixed that question up on both of them, and we might be able to stand pat with that. But
well, again, I think the word keeps coming back to me about consistency, because I coached a number of different sports and had some success in the other sports as well. It's the way that you approach, always trying to give your best effort before you ask them to give their best effort. And I think they see that, and even though you're hard on them at times, to try to get them to understand there's a reason for it. I think the difference, like with girls from guys, is that girls, when you first, at least when I first started coaching girls, the one thing that I found that was a big difference was they took everything personal.
Yeah.
And they really needed to understand that it wasn't personal, that it was just, you know, a way of trying to explain to you things that you needed to do. And the other thing about the female athlete is they all tend to think that they're not as good as they are, whereas guys all think they're a lot better than they are more often than not.
Yeah.
And so it's getting used to those two adjustments, I think, was the hard part for me, going from male athletes to female athletes, was the fluctuation of emotion.
Sure.
But they tend to give you more. They don't think they know everything. They want to learn. You know, they're willing to try to do what you ask them to do if you explain it to them properly.
Right.
Whereas guys just say, you know, come on, man, just let me do my thing.
Yeah.
And I'm already good at this, you know. I'm going NBA lottery, man. And they won't make the JV team, you know. It's okay.
Good point. Well, Coach, this has been fabulous, more than I really thought we were going to talk about and what roads we went down. It's just great stuff, memory lane. Coach Fagula, we thank you for coming in, but this is only the first part. The second part, we're going to sit down with the coach and we're going to go over that fourth quarter, that exciting fourth quarter, Londonderry versus Bedford, and that's coming up in a minute. So stay tuned for the second part with the coach.